Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock, and I will call the City Council Workshop of July 28th, 2021 to order. I am presiding today as Mayor Pro Tem in Mayor Severin's absence. I would like, on behalf of the staff and the City Council, to send out good wishes and quick healing. Due to COVID-19, this will be both a physical meeting location and a virtual meeting per Washington Proclamation 20-28. Today's meeting may be viewed live YouTube. City staff are participating via teleconference. Guests that are included in staff presentations will be excused from the Ring Central meeting at the conclusion of the agenda item as appropriate. As we have 2 items for action on today's agenda, I will ask our city clerk to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mayor Pro Tem Munns, you are here, obviously. Councilmember Heisen. Present. Councilmember Mack.
Present.
Councilmember Servadius.
Present.
Councilmember Goebel.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council Members Wassinger and Wiesner have indicated that they will be absent today.
Thank you very much. So noted.
If I could just ask a point of clarification, would it be appropriate to entertain a motion to excuse the council members who are absent today?
Would someone like to make the motion? Mr. Servadius?
I move to excuse council members Wassinger and Wiesner.
Second by Councilman Heisman. All those in favor? I'm used to pressing the button.
I know.
And I'm guessing you can see Mac, virtual, okay. Oh, any opposed? All right, let's move on. Action item number 1, bond financing terms. Finance Director David Goldman will present and review our options, please, sir. Mr. Goldman?
Dave, we're not hearing you.
Dave, can you unmute, please?
Yes, it is now unmuted, and I turned my camera on. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. This is a continuation of the refunding 2011 LTGO Marina bond item. Just to give a little bit of overview of what we discussed earlier, we asked banks to bid on 3 options, and all the options that we included are callable. Option A would be the level savings. That would reduce the amount of annual payments and provide a savings each year. Option B is consistent payments. That would keep the payments at the current level and shorten the final maturity, realizing all the savings in year 10. And then we have option C, the accelerated payments. That would increase the payments for the first 5 years and would pay off the debt in half the time. We received various bids from banks, and after the agenda item was created and put into the system, we received an updated bid from the Commerce Bank for option C on Thursday afternoon. That now becomes our best option if the council decides to go with option C. You can see that the estimated net present value savings for all the different options are listed here. They range from $178 to $181 to $221,000 over the life of the loans. In percentage form, they range from 12% to 12.25% and 15%. And you can see the annual savings in option A would be $20,000. For option B, you'd have the final year savings of $182,000. And then for option C, you'd have an increased cost for the first 5 years, but then the final 5 years, you'd have a savings of the average payment we're making now, which is $184,000. On the next few slides, Chris Sublett will be available to provide an overview of his discussions with the Marina Committee and other information that the City Council requested.
Hi, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. If we can go to the next slide, please. I just want to provide a little background information on the marina, on the history of the dredge fee, and on our rates. I might also add that Ken Hewlett, Mr. Ken Hewlett is also on the line.
Chris,
He's the
Chris,
chairman
Sublette,
of the
wait,
Marine
wait.
Advisory Committee, so he's available for questions well. And then I believe there's going to be a gentleman who would like to provide some public comment as well.
Chris Sublette,
So
could
just
you
some
turn the
background-
volume up,
Yes.
please? Could you turn the volume
Oh.
up? You're hard to hear in chambers.
Okay.
Thank you. You have a very soft voice, which is nice, but we need to hear. Thank you, sir.
Okay, can you hear me better now? Can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, good. So just some background information. The marina has about 420 slips, depending upon how we put boats in there. We offer covered and uncovered slips, and our slips range from 24 to 70 feet. The average size of the boat, in the marina is 32 feet. We need to dredge every 10 to 15 years, and our last dredging was in 2010. At that time, we only dredged about half of the marina, so there are parts of the marina that haven't been dredged in a very, very long time. Next slide, please. So the history on the dredge fee is that it was implemented in 2010. It was originally $1.15 per foot. We did reduce that to $1.03 per foot due to the marina not being fully dredged, and we didn't use as much of the money as we wanted. And it's important to note that the dredge fee is actually one of the line items that make up the mortgage bill. When people come in and say, I want to pay my mortgage, there's several elements, or what's your mortgage cost? There's several elements that make up that, and this is one of them. The elements are mortgage, then there's tax on mortgage, there's a dredge fee, tax on the dredge fee, and then an environmental compliance fee. The dredge fee was set up for 20 years, so we have about 10 years left in this original dredge fee. And it's only charged to mortgage tenants. Those people in the storage sheds and along the fence line do not pay the dredge fee. Next, please.
There.
It's very hard for me. I keep wanting to hit the button. Continuing on with the dredge fee, honestly, it was very controversial. I was not harbor master at the time it was implemented, but I do remember hearing the grumblings out there. And realistically, 25 to 30% of our permanent tenants left. Since that time, about half have come back, and it's acceptable now as it is. There's not too much of an issue, and rarely does it come up in conversation other than what is this for a new tenant. So next slide, please. Moving on to the Marine Advisory Committee, they recently met and made a recommendation for option C based on the dredging that we need to have done. The MAC has made dredging a priority, and in fact, starting in September 2021 at our next Marine Advisory Committee meeting, we're actually putting that on the agenda, and I would expect that not too long, maybe even this meeting, that we'll get a formal recommendation to move forward with the dredging project, get it started, and we'll bring that to council for guidance and approval to move forward. The bottom line is they're concerned about having to get a second bond for new dredging. They felt like the increase in the dredge fee was worth it now so that we could start the dredging sooner. And just as a side note, what we're talking about now is getting permits and starting the process, but it takes approximately 2 years, and that might even be a hope to actually start dredging. Once the project is approved by council, we'll start with the permitting and engineering and all that stuff. And it's the permitting that takes a while. And just an example, to do the work on the breakwater, which does not have that much of an environmental impact, took over 9 months for us to get the permits to do that. And dredging will certainly take much longer. Next slide, please. So although this conversation today is not based on rates, I think it's important that the council understands our rates and how we get to our rates. So the Oak Harbor Marina rates are based on an average of the marinas in our area: Cap Santé, Anacortes, La Conner, Everett, and Des Moines. We take an average of their rates for similar size slips, and then we try and put our rates at about 80% of the average. Our last rate increase was April 1st, 2021, and our next rate increase is scheduled for April 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. These charts show what our rates are currently for some of the key size categories, and this is a month-to-month rate, compared to the other marinas and to the average. The top chart shows what it currently is, what the average is, and what the percentage we're charging is. The bottom slide shows what our rates would be and what the percentages are. I'm sorry, I knew my phone would ring during this. What the rates would be if we added the $2.16 dredge fee immediately. So we just thought this was good information for you to take a look at. Next slide.
And Chris, you meant not adding $2.16, but just adding the difference between 216 and the current 103.
That's correct. Yes, you are correct. Thank you for that clarification. So one of the options that the council may choose is a phasing scenario if they choose option C. In the first column, you can see that we're charging $1.03 a foot. And you can see based upon the average boat 32 feet, that's $37.19. And we're currently using $157,000 out of our fund balance.
Well, we're not currently using it. That would be if we implemented option C.
Yes. Thank you, David. Year one, that would move to $1.31. Year two, $1.60. Year three, $1.88. And year four, $2.16. So one of the challenges as we look at the dredge fee, we know that when we dredge next time, that's going to be somewhere around $4.5, maybe in $5 million. So we know that dredge fee is going to go up. And the big question that we're asking ourselves is, do we want to continue on the path we're on and use up some of the fund balance, or do we want to incrementally increase the dredge fee over the next few years, knowing that we're going to have to increase it at the next dredge effort? So that's a big question and a big consideration. So as we move up to the next dredge cycle, that dredge fee could go up beyond this even. So next slide. So recently, actually on July 20th, Neil went out and did a bunch of soundings around the marina. The marina was dredged to -12 in 2010. So the numbers that you see on the marina map here, the 10 foot, the 7 foot, that 8 foot, that means that it is zero tide. There's 10 feet of water in that area. There's 7 feet of water in that area and 8 feet of water in that area. The alarming part of this chart is if you move within the marina, you see there's a 6 and a 5. There's a 5 at the bottom of the gangway. And then there's 6s and 8s and 8s and 9s. That may sound like a lot of water, but we have a lot of sailboats that come into the marina that draw 6 or 7 feet of water. So this is at a zero tide. And what happens is in the summer, we have all of our low and negative tides in the day. So recently we had a -3. Just the other day we had a -2, had a -1 yesterday. So if you take that away, these areas that are 9 and 8, suddenly they're 8 and 7 and 5 and 7 and 9. We are getting silted in, and the marina is becoming shallower and shallower each day. So there's a real need for dredging. So moving forward for the rest of the presentation, Dave will be going over some of the financial information.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So based on a cost, an estimated cost of, let's just say $4.5 million for future dredging, at 20 years, if the bond was issued at 3%, the debt service, the annual debt service on that would be around $300,000. Now, as we talked about before, the current dredging fee at $1.03 per lineal foot generates $143,000 annually. The additional dredging fee needed would be that additional $1.13 per lineal foot, and that would generate $157,000 for a total of $300,000, which would cover sufficient funds to cover a future dredging issue, assuming that it's 4.5 million in 20 years and 3%. So what we're asking the council to provide us today is what direction we would like us to go with as far as the different options. And even if option C is chosen, marina fee changes are not required to be adopted today. So it's open for discussion, and that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. I have down here for the public meeting that let's see. This is an action item, and we will allow public comment. I understand that Byron Scooby would like to comment. Is Mr. Scooby online? Can someone
yes, I
let him
am.
in? Thank you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir, we sure can. Go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Byron Scooby, and I've been a continuous tenant of Oak Harbor Marina for, since 1980. As far as I know, there's only one other marina tenant who's been a continuous tenant longer than I have. I'd like to address the options for financing for the marina dredging. And personally, of the three options presented, I would very much favor option C, which is a substantial increase in the dredging fee to pay off the bond sooner. The marina currently is, and as we heard, is very much in need of dredging again in the near future. And I think it is imperative that a plan for financing the costs of future dredging be considered along with the plans for refinancing the current debt. Most marina tenants, in my opinion, would not tolerate a substantial increase in dredging fees now, only to be presented with a much larger fee in a few years to finance the next dredging project. This leaves the risk that a large number of tenants may find they cannot afford the dredging fees and leave the marina for more affordable moorage, as happened after our last dredging several years ago. The marina is a very valuable asset for the city, and the city cannot afford to lose this asset due to lack of dredging. The fact that the marina has operated as an enterprise fund means that marina tenants have to bear 100% of the capital and operational costs of the marina, even though it provides a large public benefit to the city as well. The public uses the marina for launching their boats, fishing, and crabbing. In addition, it's used for public events such as this weekend's hydroplane races, and as a staging area for various city parades, during which events the marina tenants' access to the marina is very limited. In summer, a large number of visiting boaters stay overnight at the marina and provide economic boost for downtown businesses. I feel strongly that the city needs to recognize the fact that the marina is a valuable public asset, which will be lost without proper dredging, and should therefore relieve the enterprise fund of some or all of the future dredging costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scooby. Appreciate that very much. City Clerk, are there any other comments at this time?
No, Mayor Pro Tem, we received no other comments on this item.
All right, I will close public comment at this time and open it up for discussion with council, including the virtual members. Speak up. Thank you. Councilman Servadius.
Thank you. Tim, I don't know how close I need to be to this or how this is close enough. Mr. Goldman, could you bring the, I think, or just back up probably, it was 2 slides.
All right, let me start.
Oh, sorry. Maybe go forward to, it was the next slide. So here is the, I just want to make sure, where was the slide with the 300,000 a year as the debt service? Will the current rate plus the incremental, the first incremental increase cover both the debt service on the current bond as well as the debt service for the 4.5 million? That's the part I was not clear on. Maybe it was another slide in there. Somewhere you had, it was 300,000, was the debt service 300,000 annually for 4.5 million? What slide was that?
Oh, sorry. I'm having a little trouble hearing you clearly. I'm sorry. This is the slide, the 300,000?
Correct. So I just want to make sure the current dredging fee of $1.03 plus the first year of $1.13, that is sufficient to cover the debt service when we refinance this current bond at an accelerated rate as well as a future bond of 4.5 million. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, yes. Once you add, if you take the 103, which is 142,000, yeah, that's what it generates, and you add $1.13 per lineal foot, that's 157. If you add those together, you'll get 300,000, which, assuming that we borrow 4.5 million for 20 years at 3%, I'm not sure what the interest rates will be in the future, but with those assumptions, that's what it would cover it. Yeah, it would cover a future dredging issue.
So,
However, there is one caveat. If we're still paying off the existing debt, because let's say we borrow this money within the 5-year time frame, we'll have to figure out how to defease the bond, pay off whatever's left on the bond we're refinancing now, in order to you have this amount be enough to pay off the the new bond, the $4.5 million, and we should have sufficient fund balance to do that. In in 2 or 3 years, we should have enough fund balance to do that. But it's hard to predict the future, of course.
thank you. So tell me if I'm saying this correctly. The current rate of $1.03 will retire, is it 2-ish million? What is left? Or was that the original bond rate? What's left on our current outstanding bond?
I think it's about 1.48, about $1.5 million or $1.48 million.
So if we continue at the rate of 1.03, that will retire that if we refinance it. And then if we were to add in the first year an additional $1.13, that would be sufficient capital to prepare for a future $4.5 million 20-year bond issue?
Yeah, that would generate about $300,000 a year between the two of them, and that would be enough to pay off the future debt service issue with those assumptions on the top bullet.
But we keep mentioning the $300,000 just pays off the future bond issue. What's paying off the current bond issue?
Oh, the current bond issue is partially being funded by the current dredging fee. Currently, it averages to about $184,000 a year on debt service on the current issue. The dredging fee generates $143, so it's not quite the full amount that's needed to cover the existing debt.
So I'll put my mic back on. I'm just turning to my peers here. I just want to make sure we're preparing and we're adequately paying off the current bond that we're about to refinance, and preparing, because we know it's coming, for a future dredging project. And I guess, Mr. Sublette, going back to you, a question. Is that just dredging the marina? Is there any dredging of the channel as well?
No, sir, that would just be the marina from the, just outside the breakwater, just west of the breakwater, into shore.
And did we do any soundings just outside the breakwater or the channel as it turns west?
No, we didn't do any soundings out there. We just did in the areas where you see the numbers.
Right, I'll pause that. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I believe Councilman Heisen has some comments, please.
Thank you. Yeah, seeing those depth soundings is a little scary. A 5 and 6 at zero tide when the tide is routinely at -2 and even 3+ feet is, yeah, I mean, that renders the marina basically unusable for several hours out of the day for a lot of boats. So this obviously needs to get done. I appreciate the Marina Advisory Committee and the marina tenants, being willing to consider option C. Sometimes it's just easier to take a small hit up front for a bigger payoff in the end, and I totally support that. I do have a question about the the wording of the motion, we've got, the suggested motion says, use option blank with blank bank, and down on the chart of options and responses, there are numerous financial institutions listed. So I guess this would be a question for Mr. Goldman. If we were to go with option C, we have either BB&T, Trust Bank, or U.S. Bank. Is there a preference? Has anyone indicated a preference?
Well, we did receive an updated bid from the Commerce Bank on Thursday, and I think Julie may have sent out the updated rate sheet that our financial advisor put together. So right now, the Commerce Bank is the number, is the strongest candidates for option A, B, and C. And I put on the presentation, I changed it to the Commerce Bank.
You did, okay.
Assuming the council would want to go with the strongest bid. I left the option blank though, depending on what the council decides.
I hadn't seen that most recent one. Thank you. That answers my question.
Mayor Pro Tem Menz.
If I might interrupt for a second, this is Ken Hewlett, but for some reason, the audio coming in from the off-site people is very clear, but the audio from the people there at the dais is garbled and distorted. I don't know whether it's a matter of distance from the mics or whatever, but it makes it very difficult for us to hear you at the dais.
Thank you, Mr. Hewlett. Appreciate that comment.
Mayor Pro Tem Menz, Councilmember Mack has his hand up.
Councilman Mack, your comments, please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everybody hear me down there in council?
Oh, great.
Okay. So this is a two-part, Mr. Sublet. So what I'm understanding here is we're in need of a future dredging, and then we have option C on the table. So, Mr. Sublet, am I correct in understanding that the Marine Advisory Board would prefer option C so they could accelerate the payoff so they could position themselves for a future dredging? Would that be a correct statement?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Sublet, this is for both you, and I understand where Mr. Scooby's coming from on here. Has anybody introduced or thought of, and do we need to go to more of a user fee? Now, these user fees have been used in certain instances where people that use these are people that pay. Now, it needs to be different for different people, but we have, from what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing out there as years go by, we have a lot of people using the marina and enjoying the marina, but aren't attached to some of these fees. So yes, it's an enterprise fund, but at the same time, I hear Mr. Scooby and agree with him that the city needs to take a bigger responsibility. And so has anybody ever worked out some kind of a plan where 10, 20% of the people using this can be contributing to not necessarily the current debt we have, but for a future dredging?
No, sir, that's never come up in any discussion I've been part of. So that's,
Okay.
No.
Well, I would somewhat recommend that we start looking at that for the future, because I do understand if you get these rates too high for mortgage fees, that you could run the risk of losing people when we're really trying to attract people. And I understand it does bring in business, and there's a lot of people that come over and do like our marina, even though we have some downsides to it and that type of thing. So that's something that I could support. Again, how much of a user fee would depend upon the different groups and organizations or individuals and what type of boats and that type of thing. So, but it sounds like the Marine Advisory Board would prefer option C.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Sublet.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Mr. Oburn, please.
Yeah, Chris, didn't the marina just implement recently a boat launch fee That's kind of the fee that he's talking about, and that is helping the fund balance?
Yes, that is helping the fund balance. I think this is our third year of charging a boat launch fee to commercial users and recreational users as well. A daily fee and a yearly fee, depending upon what they would like to do. But yeah, we have put that type of fee in, but we don't have any fees. I think what Mr. Mack was alluding to was fees for use of the marina for like the hydroplane races and events that we do down there, stuff like that. So.
Any other comments?
Well, I was just this is Ken Hewlett again, commenting from the Marina Advisory Committee meeting. Actually, just about all of our income is user fees. Whether you're in a slip or have a storage shed or using the launch ramp or you're storing a trailer over next to the fence line and so forth, it's all based pretty much on the space that you're using, whether it's a lineal foot of a boat or whatever. So that's the basis of the financial status, is that the users of the marina, current users of the marina, are paying for the maintenance and operations as they currently exist. Now, what that doesn't address, obviously, is the future needs. And that's why it wasn't a unanimous decision to go to option C, but it was financially perhaps the best, because we're going from current bond rates of somewhere over 4% to rates that are less than 1%. And it's a unique time in my history, certainly, where those kinds of rates have been available for this type of a project. So I think we're driven by two different things. A way to decrease our carrying costs of the current debt, which option actually B or C would accomplish to a certain degree. And what is not being addressed, other than providing sort of the psyche of higher dredging fees, it's not really addressing the ultimate cost of the next round of dredging, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years out, whenever we can get the permits and so forth to do it. The need is now, because not only is it an issue for deep draft vessels, but it's even shallow draft vessels can end up sitting on the mud during a -3 foot tide, and that's extremely detrimental to the health of a boat. You got your running gear, the metal parts and the fiberglass bits and anything else. Anytime that's in contact with the bottom, it accelerates the maintenance issues and challenges. And you can't use your boat, obviously, because it's not available for movement. Anyway, that's just a little more background.
Thank you, Mr. Hewlett. Any other comments? Ms. Heisen?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I move to direct the city's designated representative to proceed with the issuance of a limited tax general obligation bond using option C with Commerce Bank that is contained in the attached bank bid summary.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, before I call for the question, I wanted to make some comments. Mr. Sublette,
Yes, ma'am.
the 420 slips, they're not quite all rented right now. Summer's usually the prime time. Are they aware that the 24-foot, the 27-foot boats, they're usually not in a higher income, that they may be coming up with a $2.26 additional fee to what they pay for their boat?
No, I have not put out any announcements or anything like that to the boating community. I was waiting to see what the council had decided.
Okay, from previous data, I know you've got records there from other harbor masters and stuff. It sounds this is logical to get the good rates, to pay off, to get the permit started. I have witnessed our own boat sitting on the bottom and we can't get out. Sometimes we move it the night before to FDOC, but half of FDOC now is permanent moorage, which we need to help bring in the income. But it makes it difficult in the summertime when you want to use it. But I worry how many of these 420 slips, I'm not sure how many you have rented now, probably 80%. How many will leave when this price goes up? Or maybe it's another year or two. Because if they leave and we figured out this price, then it's even a bigger deficit for a enterprise fund to have to make up unless the city steps up during this time and we figure out a way to give them some money. The senior center, many, many years ago, was strictly enterprise, and they couldn't make it unless the city gave them money. And now they have about $400,000. The marina, which brings in people to visit, I have been down there when the smelters are there, and it's like a national world conference. So many languages, and they get along, and what are you using, and what, hand language and stuff. It's just amazing to see the public there, but also the different boaters. They don't care if you're rich or poor. If you have an idea to fix a boat, it's unique, and it is an asset that, as a city, you can never get back once it's built in. But there's a balance, to me, between the enterprise fund, which is necessary and has been operating, but if you don't have a marina and you don't pay for the dredging, then what happens? So there's got to be a way somehow, I would think, between the finance, city administrator, and the council, we can figure out a way to put some funds into the marina to get this done. Because you lose the asset, you'll never get it back. And that would be such a big loss. So that, if you have any thoughts about that, Mr. Sublett, I would love to hear that. Please, sir.
Yeah, definitely. You touched on people, the rates getting so high that people leave. And truthfully, that scares me to death, because without the people, we're not going to have a marina. We need to keep our marina full. Currently, it's at over 100% capacity. We're stuffing boats everywhere, but that's the, June, July, August timeframe. The rest of the year, we're at about 75, 80% is our low, depending upon the year. Things really drop off after Labor Day. And we did see in the past that, when the dredge rate was first introduced, and I don't know if that was we saw people leave, and I don't know if that was because the message wasn't conveyed correctly. I don't know, exactly what happened. Again, I wasn't part of all that, but I know there were some really angry people, and I can never discern, were they angry because of the dredge fee, or were they angry because the dredge fee was served to them? I don't know the answer to that. I do know that we have a older marina, and we continually get comments on two things. One, the staff, the can-do attitude. Yeah, we can help you with that. We can do that. And two, the cleanliness and just the layout of the marina. People really love those slips out on FDOC. And if those people stop coming, we're in big trouble, definitely. On the flip side of this, I also know that if we don't dredge, we're not going to have a marina, plain and simple. It's already becoming a challenge, as you mentioned, Mayor Pro Tem, with your boat. You really have to strategically plan when you come and go. And yours isn't the only boat like that. So it is a challenge. We're kind of in a tough spot. But I do know if we don't plan for the future and we don't dredge, we will have nothing. So.
Just one added comment. You don't happen to have a picture of that boat that was tied up at the dock that had been launched and didn't read the tide charts and flipped on its side, did you, by any chance?
I actually have that on my phone, yes. That was just very poor planning on that individual's part. That was a minus 1.8 tide, I believe, and he hit it right on. And he only drew about 5 feet. And he had come into the launch ramp, tied up to the dock, didn't plan well, tide went away, and his boat rolled over onto the launch ramp dock. So he was laying completely on his side on the dock.
And how large a boat was this, sir?
That was approximately a 38-foot boat. It's a boat that we've had in the marina many, many times. 38 feet, drew about 5 feet. The guy simply made a mistake, didn't read his tide charts. But you could even look at that a different way and say the boats that are using the launch ramp, the small ones, the trailerable boats, there are tides where they cannot launch because it's just too shallow there. And that has not a lot to do with the angle of the ramp. There's just not enough water there.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to put in perspective of what happens. And we were coming in from our cruising trip and saw this boat over on its side. And it takes more than just an hour for it to come back in. What is it, 6 hours?
It's approximately 6 hours. So he got to experience the extreme low, and then he got to experience as the tide come back in. It's not the tide comes back in and it just rolls up. You've got to have enough water under the boat. He was there for a good 4 hours. So,
all right, thank you.
It took a while.
I believe Mr. Oburn has a comment, please.
Yeah, and follow up to your comment there about funding. I just want to give Chris Sublett credit for going after grant funding as much as possible. And so any grant funding we have certainly helps with the rate. And we've got some good grants. We got the $400,000 that was in the biannual, not this last one, but the one before that. And we're in the process of spending that and some other grant funding there. And certainly we'll continue to go over after grant funding as much as possible.
And I realize that, but I believe there's probably going to be a crunch come, and if so many people lift, the grant writing doesn't come in fast enough. So we need to be thinking about some other help. Anyway, I will call for the question now. Oh, wait. Councilman Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I have a question for the Marine Advisory Committee. In schools throughout the year with all the changes, administrators would call it like a temperature check. But I was wondering if we've done like a temperature check on the attitude of tenants in regards to potential increase of fees. I know there was one Finance Director Goldman mentioned back this spring. Curious if you guys have heard any chatter. Do you think that people would throw their hands up in the air and walk out of the marina if potentially the fees increased again?
I don't know. I can't speak for the whole committee, but I can tell you that we have had these discussions at the Marina Advisory Committee, and as recently as the April increase, we talked about it at length. Considered several different options, but we're on a schedule right now of 3% annual increases for, I think it's 3 years, isn't it, Chris? Anyway.
We have 1 year left.
Yeah. And that's just sort of our inflation adjustment, if you will. That's not the way we term it, but, and when we discussed this particular issue in our last meeting, one of our tenants, who is also a member of the committee, expressed two things very strongly. One, there's a definite need for dredging because even some of the smaller boats are having issues with having water underneath the keel. And the other thing that he commented on was he didn't want to see any increases in rates. So, we're kind of stuck in the middle. We understand that it's very rate sensitive, and we also understand that smaller boats, many of them have the ability to move on to trailers if not just leave the marina for another marina, but put their boat on a trailer and park it someplace. And that's an option that really wasn't realistic up until just a few years ago when people started getting, hardier trailers and bigger towing vehicles and all that sort of thing. So we know we walk a tightrope, and I think as far as presenting this to the public, our tenants, the people that pay the bills, we're going to have to focus on the fact that this is a unique opportunity to save money, even though it costs something, because interest rates are so low right now, and we're refinancing expensive debt and paying it off with cheaper dollars.
Thank you. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. So I don't have any further comments. Thank you.
Mr. Mack, do you have any other comments? I can't see you.
Well, I'm still here. No, I do not have any more comments at this time, Mayor Pro Tem. But did again, the audio is quite garbled, but did I hear the motion on option C, as in cat?
Yes, sir, you did, and I have not called for the question yet, just further discussion.
Okay, no comments on my end. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. All right, I will officially call for the question. All in favor of approving or moving towards option C, with knowing that the increase in rates for old dredging, new dredging, starting the permit, all in favor, please signal by saying aye or raise your hand.
Councilmember Mack's hand is raised.
All right. And just for the sake, any opposed? All right, that passes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Washington State Auditor's Office Data Sharing Agreement. Director Goldman again, for your presentation, please.
I'm firing it up right now. All right, let's get this thing going. All right, this is for a data sharing agreement with the Washington State Auditors. So there was a recent piece of legislation signed by the governor on May 12th. It requires data sharing agreements between state agencies that share data with local governments. Oak Harbor does share financial and performance data with the state auditor's office during the audit. And the annual audit for the year 2020 is scheduled to start in a few weeks. And it's real important that we enter into this agreement to commence the process, the audit process. Data is provided to the state auditor's office via their secure file transfer protocol site. The state auditor's office limits the use of data shared per RCW 43.09, and the agreement period is from the date of execution through June 30th, 2024. So there's our recommended motion, and that's the end of this staff presentation.
Thank you, sir. City Clerk, do we have any public comments for this item, please?
No, Mayor Pro Tem, we did not receive any public comment.
Thank you. Okay, Council, any comments about this agreement with the state auditors? Mr. Mack, any comments about this agreement with the state auditors? All right.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, I do have a comment for Mr. Goldman. Mr. Goldman, is there any particular reason this is not done annually versus like a 3-year contract?
It's a brand new thing that the state implemented pretty recently. It was signed off on May 12th by the governor. That's just the amount of years they had in the agreement. Perhaps they want to review the terms in 3 years and tweak them and resend them back to all the local governments in Washington. But I hadn't heard of any particular reason why they made it 3 years.
So it's our only option, either none or 3 years.
Well, I think Grant would be able to give you a little bit more background on that, because a lot of, every city that he works with is also having to do this, and there wasn't a lot of flexibility from the state auditor's office on this agreement, but he might be able to give you a little bit more background on it.
All right, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Yeah, this is an agreement offered by the statewide to all jurisdictions that are required to have audit, and there were a handful of concerns that various city attorneys around the state raised about it, but there didn't apparently there wasn't much flexibility in terms of what the state was willing to entertain in terms of changes to this agreement. So it's an agreement that's necessary. Could we improve upon it? Yes. Do we have that opportunity? Probably not.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. Councilman Servadius.
Just a quick question, Mr. Goldman. We have two different motions. We have the one in the packet, and then we have the one in page 16, which is the same that's displayed digitally. Do you have a preference? One has you signing it, the other has the mayor signing it.
I don't have, I mean, Grant, it probably should be the mayor signing it, right?
Yeah, my recommendation would be to have the motion authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement.
All right, thank you. No further questions. Mayor Pro Tem, I move to authorize the mayor to sign the interagency data sharing agreement with the Washington State Auditor.
We have a motion and a second to authorize the mayor to sign the interagency data sharing agreement with the Washington State Auditors. Any other comments? Call for the question. All in favor, raise your hand, please.
Councilmember Mack's hand is raised.
All right, and any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Goldman, you're up again. Woodby Island Homeless Coalition donation. You are on a roll, sir.
All right, let me get that one fired up. Where's that one saved? Here we go. It's loading up. It's taking a little while. Here we go. All right, share that screen. All right. So $50,000 of funding was included in the biennial budget for a capital contribution to the Woodby Island Homeless Coalition for a building purchased and upgrade. Of that amount, $45,000 was used for REIT 2 funds based on a REIT, well, based at the time it was recent, when this was happening last year. There was legislation that expanded the use of REIT 2 funding for such purposes. So clarification was received that REIT 2 would actually not likely be a good candidate for this purpose because the subject property or the subject facility, it's not a city facility. And in order to stay on track with the contribution, another source of funding should be used for the $45,000 of the total $50,000 donation. And suggested funding sources include the general fund balance, Sleeper Road proceeds, or perhaps the American Rescue Plan Act funds. Now, I know this is not on the action agenda, so I'm not sure, Grant, how we should go about receiving council direction on this.
I guess my question would be, is this of such time sensitivity that there does need to be some kind of formal action today, or just guidance in terms of the funding source?
Well, what I would do is, based on what the council directs us to do, if they tell us to use one of these other funding sources, perhaps, I would include it in the next round of budget amendment. So then they would get a chance to approve it officially in a future budget amendment.
So I guess my question is there a need for actual action today, or can it be held over till the next regular meeting, since it wasn't noted as an action item on the agenda?
Blaine has a comment.
Yeah, I think we're just kind of looking for input and letting you know in advance that possibly it's coming. Ultimately, we'll actually have agreement, probably a professional service agreement where we award the money, and at that time we'll have to identify the funding. So I guess David wants some kind of preference input up front to just kind of help him in drafting it, but certainly we could bring it forward with additional options and just leave it open-ended. But we're just kind of, we don't make actions, but it doesn't look like anybody's having any counsel. We just kind of take input here, and we'll continue to move ahead if it appears that there's not any objection or any negative input from the consensus of the council.
Grant, are you Other comments you'd like to make?
I would just say it's fine if council wants to give some guidance or direction, understanding that professional services agreement will actually be your final action on this, and that would come back to you at a future meeting.
All right, I have two hands. Mr. Savadius, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. It's been a while since we've done this in person. This is kind of exciting. But I agree with Mr. Weed, Mr. Oborn. There's nothing that says we can't discuss it and provide input. That's the purpose of the workshop. And then absolutely final action will be taken at a later date. For me, I would support either general fund balance. It sounds like you've alluded, Mr. Goldman, to hopefully a fairly solid 2021. So that would allude or hopefully indicate, an increase in sales tax and maybe even some sales tax and real estate tax that would go into the general fund. So depending on how all of that balances out, I think there would be probably some opportunity from the general fund. I want to keep the Sleeper Road proceeds personally earmarked more towards parks. I think that's kind of a consensus that we all had, was keeping that earmarked for city parks. And I would not be opposed to the American Rescue Plan Act funds. I'd want to make sure, I know there was a little bit of a recent issue with the county and maybe being excited and wanting to award people appropriately and rightfully so. I just want to, I guess if you come back with an agenda item, make sure that we know that that would be an appropriate use of those funds, just so we don't jump the gun on a resolution there. But my preference would be either fund balance or American Rescue Fund Plan proceeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
And just to clarify the use of the American Rescue Plan Act funds, there's those 5 different buckets that folks can use funding out of, and the county was using it out of the 3rd bucket, which is that supplemental pay bucket, and there are restrictions. Well, the actual guidelines from the American Rescue Plan Act say you can actually pay folks retroactively. However, Washington state law preempts that and says you can't pay folks retroactively. It'd be a gift of public funds. So I think that's maybe where the confusion came about at the county level. But as far as utilizing the fund, that particular source of funding for this purposes, we can put this, we would be able to put this under the most flexible area, the revenue loss calculation that I talked about, if that's the direction the council wants to go in.
Thank you. Ms. Heisen?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Servatius touched on my exact thoughts. I think that the Sleeper Road proceeds have been officially earmarked for parks. I thought that was an official action that we took, but I could be mistaken about that. But I agree. I would be more comfortable using general fund balance or ARPA funds.
Any other comments? Ms. Goebel?
Thank you. I am in the same boat as Councilmember Heisen and Servatius, general fund balance or the American Rescue Plan Act funds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Mack's hand is raised.
Councilman Mack, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would be opposed to any general fund balance. In addition to Sleeper Road proceeds, there's a significant amount from the American Rescue Plan Act funds. And this is I don't quite know how to say it. I don't see a let up in a lot of the homeless situation. This is an important facility for the entire Whidbey Island. This is in the county. We committed on this, and due to some unexpected expenses, large expenses from the Homeless Coalition on this facility, I would even support if we can use the American Rescue Plan Funds Act to kick that up a small percentage so they can proceed forward and get this open. It's needed, and I think it's an important facility, and I think it'll help the situation that we currently face. And I do believe this is the way to go. Let's hang on to our general fund balance and the Sleeper Road proceeds and disperse this and see if we can't help them out in many ways and even up that, as I said. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. I believe our attorney and our finance director have a direction they're picking up, so we can move on to the next item unless you have other questions. All right, Marina Host Agreement. Mr. Sublett, you are back again, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We're going to talk about the Marina Host. I am going to share my screen with you. So the Marina Host, you may not be aware of this, but we've had a Marina Host for many, many years at the Marina, long before I was even there. And this Marina Host position is much like a campground host. They watch over the marina when the staff isn't present. In our case, the Marina Host performs a lot of very valuable duties. They check up on a lot of stuff in the marina, and they ensure the well-being of all our guests and ensure that their answers or their questions are answered as well. Typically, in a routine day, they circulate through the marina and check all the doors and locks, the fuel dock, to make sure everything's secure. They open and close the gate during the off-season and holidays when we're not around. They keep an eye on the restrooms. One of the biggest compliments that we get is our restrooms are clean and fully stocked all the time, and they're a big part of that. And they provide a lot of information to our guests about shopping and where to eat and just about our downtown and how to get there and that sort of thing. So they're really a valuable asset to the marina. It's important to note that the Marina Host does not collect any marina fees or conduct any financial transactions. So while they're out circulating around on the guest dock after we're gone, if some guest boater wants to pay them, they would direct them to the pay stations. They don't take any payment whatsoever. Our Marina Hosts are considered a volunteer. However, they do receive a $475 per month discount on moorage or storage, just applied towards their marina bill. And it's been the same amount for the past 2 years. Brian and Deanna Punch have been the Marina Hosts for the last 8 years, and they continually receive praises from tenants and guests. They're just very happy-go-lucky people and genuinely nice people, which is what we like. They've agreed to bring the Marina Host for the next 12 months, so there's no change there. This is an item that we'll be bringing forth on the August 4th City Council consent agenda, and we'll be seeking authorization for the mayor to sign the Marina Host agreement with them. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Council, any questions? All right, this was information only. We will now go to the police department. Thank you, Mr. Sublett.
Yep, thank you.
Hello, Council. Can everybody hear me okay? I've got earpieces in to try to get a better signal. You good?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm actually going to just talk about the new legal changes. I've sent out an email to all of you quite a while ago to give you some information. I'm going to ask you to sit back in your chairs and just listen for probably about 10 minutes. I'm going to turn off my video because I'm going to be reading from a document, and rather than having you see me look down and reading, I'm just going to let you focus on the words, and then I'll get back on video. So I am going to share a screen real quick. Make sure this works. Is that screen up so everybody can see it?
Yes, it is. And I believe this is B on our agenda, so you'll go back to A after this part of the presentation, Chief?
You know, A isn't really ready. I was going to talk to you about the jail, and we're still waiting from Skagit County on some things, so it's not really ready. I will touch on that briefly when we're done with this.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be sure we don't miss anything. Please proceed.
Yeah, so trust me, I have spent hours and hours trying to figure out what exactly I should be giving you folks today and how much I should go over. And I think I'm going to probably do more than what you really want, but I'm going to do it anyways. And then at the end, I'll give you an opportunity for any questions based on our conversation. So as you know, there was a lot of changes and laws changed and adopted by the government or by our representatives and legislators, senators, and signed into law by Governor Inslee. Most of those changes take effect, and they're related to police. Most of those changes take effect July 25th, or they took effect. Some of them, a couple of the key ones won't take effect until January. So I'm going to touch on these. I'm also going to do some quotes from some different chiefs around the state. I've been, of course, I research, I pull my data. I've had more meetings than I can count as we prepare for these things. But I'm going to go through and talk about some key bills and some key issues. So House Bill 1310 requires officers to try to de-escalate a situation before using force, and then only use as much force as is needed to resolve the situation. 3 situations are clearly outlined in this bill to allow police to use force. The current standard that we had before the 25th was reasonable officer standard, and the use of force was determined to be lawful under totality of circumstances, and it was objectively reasonable. Under the new law enforcement officer in Washington State can use force only under 3 affirmative circumstances. Number 1, when probable cause exists to arrest someone. Number 2 is to prevent escape, and we're not just talking about somebody running away, but escape as defined by an RCW. And number 3 is to protect against imminent threat of bodily injury to a person. Imminent, there's a lot of debate about what that means, but generally that's recognized as meaning it's going to happen like right now or within the next short period of time. So that's 1310, which deals with the use of force. House Bill 1054 bars police from using neck restraints, no-knock search warrants, military-grade weapons, armored vehicles, and as well as limits when and why police can engage in high-speed pursuits with subjects. Now, as we go through this, bear in mind that some of this, it doesn't really affect us. Like, we don't use no-knock warrants anyways here at Oak Harbor Police Department. We only had 2 weapons that might be considered military-grade weapons under this changed law, just because they've been around forever and it's been sitting in our armory. We've currently gotten rid of those. And then the armored vehicles, we have one. It's not banned. We're allowed to have it based on its current status. Okay, again, reading from my sheet here. By adopting 1310, the legislature changed the threshold of when police can use force to probable cause instead of reasonable suspicion. For example, under the current law, or the old law, if a man was to break into your shop, you confront him and he runs away, you can call 911, provide a detailed description, and it was always considered reasonable that law enforcement arrived in the area and saw a suspect matching this description. We had the legal authority to stop him. If he ran, we could chase him and hold him. This is allowed under what's called reasonable suspicion, and it's a nationwide and case-proven standard. Effective as of July 25th, we're no longer allowed to use force, even if he's running from an officer, unless probable cause is established, which is a higher standard. And I'm going to put video back on. The impact of this reduces police interaction with non-compliant members of the public, which will no doubt have a direct impact to public safety. And let's be clear, non-compliant members of the public are usually the criminals or the suspects. Unless somebody's trying to play games, it's the criminals or suspects that don't want to stay around or that run from the police. This will change the way police will respond to some situations, and there will be some calls we will no longer respond to at all. For example, an officer observed as subject matching the description of a burglary or shoplifting suspect walking away from the scene of a crime. The officer at that moment in time has reasonable suspicion, but is no longer authorized under the new law to use reasonable amount of force necessary to detain the person if the person decides to run or escape capture. These types of contacts are often the only way police are able to identify suspects. Making contacts as a result of reasonable suspicion has been a vital step used as an investigation of a crime and allows officers to identify people or maintain contact with them while an investigation takes place. Again, under the new law, reasonable suspicion is not enough to utilize force. Most law here in Washington State, the rest of the country it is, for the most part. Most law enforcement executives have had numerous meetings with the Washington State Sheriffs and Police Chiefs Association, WCIA, and other law enforcement organizations. And there's a lot of consternation and a lot of talk about what calls we can respond to, what we can't, how we can handle them when we get there. And it's still not clarified on various things. The unfortunate thing, and one chief stated, the unfortunate thing is, I think of a person who's in a mental health crisis in a family member's home, and the family member calls us, and our response might be, "I'm sorry, it's not a crime, we can't respond." This is a statement by one chief. Sometimes those incidents require use of force, and we don't have legal authority to be there. How we handle runaways will also change. We can respond to these types of calls and attempt to deal with the runaway, but we can't take them into custody unless they voluntarily come along. We can't hold their arm. We can't stop them from running away from us. The use of force bill is also putting limits on police pursuits, which is the other bill. After July 25th, we're only allowed to pursue vehicles suspected of a major crime such as robbery, rape, homicide. Other lesser offenses we can't, and we have to have probable cause even if we pursue. And in another forum, I gave an example, and Councilman Mack, I kind of used your shop as an example, although certainly it's not meant to be. It might hit home a little bit. Let's say, for instance, a jewelry shop owner gets a call that someone broke the glass door of his business, smashed the display cases, and stole, let's just say, $200,000 worth of jewelry. The owner arrives and sees a person running to his car. There's not a confrontation, but the suspect takes off in a car. Officer sees a car and learns that it's stolen and attempts to stop it. If that vehicle takes off under the current rules, our officer cannot pursue that vehicle based on the restrictions because it doesn't meet one of those felonies. It's going to change the level of service that we give our citizens. You'll see this statement by a lot of chiefs and a lot of sheriffs. With the new law enforcement can contact a suspect to do an investigation, but if the suspect runs away or otherwise refuses to remain, we can't detain based just on this matching description alone, which would be considered reasonable suspicion. We have to have enough for probable cause. And as we're doing our investigations, we often don't have that until we do the investigation. Not being able to control a suspect will put the officer's safety in jeopardy, and will also decrease our ability to assist victims and hold suspects accountable. As one chief stated, when you drive onto a scene based on the limited information you have, you're in investigative mode at that point. You see someone that matches a description, typically that'd be enough to detain them and find out if that's them. Not now. Now it's not about how we do public safety when we can't arrest these people or detain these people. Sorry, it is about public safety. These new laws, as you see up on the screen, affect a lot of different areas. The new laws on decertification of officers is another big unknown. Now, for the first time in this state, police officers can lose their certification if they're found to use excessive force or violate one of these other rules or procedures. And this is all controlled through the Criminal Justice Training Commission, which now has taken on a new regulatory function where they were just before, their major function was training new officers. They have a multi-role, including a regulatory function now with law enforcement. There'll be some calls for assistance with troubled children or people with mental health issues that police may or may not respond to based on the circumstances. Or if we respond, we may have to leave without taking some action. I'm going to quote one of the Spokane County Sheriff, Udell, said, and I'm going to relay what he has to say about a pursuit. He says, Sheriff's Office has cut back on high-speed pursuits on its own. He said the new law goes to the point of defying common sense. Oak Harbor, when I took over as police chief, we looked at our pursuit policy and we got tighter on it. We restricted it. We restricted it to certain felonies with some specific circumstances and a couple of other circumstances, and we felt pretty comfortable with it. The policies now, the way they are, virtually we will not be able to go after suspects who leave unless they're under a specific agenda or a specific set of circumstances, like a robbery, a serious assault, like a felony assault 1 or 2. While law enforcement, and this is another quote, while law enforcement leadership supports their efforts to enhance training professionalism and accountability, as well to provide treatment alternatives to arrest. New laws will significantly affect officers' ability to detect and prevent crime, hinder and apprehension of criminals, and will render, in my opinion, too, communities less safe. Limitations on some longstanding police tactics and restrictions on less lethal alternatives will also increase risk to officers. And some of these changes that are in effect will definitely affect retention and recruiting of police officers. And we're no different here in Oak Harbor. In fact, I'll cover that a little bit with you here too. And I believe they also have a negative effect on public safety. Now, the question is, are we going to see this right away, or is it going to take months or years to manifest itself? You see that across the country right now with some of these other jurisdictions who have not only defunded the police, but also restricted their abilities, and you're seeing a rise in crime. I'm going to give another example given by another officer, and this was out of Spanaway. He said, Friday morning after someone poured gasoline on a strip of grass and lit it on fire, the deputy took the man into custody in the area based on the description given by a witness during a 911 call. The sergeant who relayed this said the deputy had reasonable suspicion, and this is before the 25th. Now, though, 25th, we would need probable cause, so they couldn't take that person into custody, and if that person resisted or took off, they couldn't do anything about that. Unfortunately, what that does is it limits our ability to identify suspects, it limits our ability to help victims of crimes, and not that we can't still investigate, but it makes it much, much harder. Also, again, I'm going to skip some of this. I'm going to go down to a couple other quotes. A spokesperson for Representative Roger Goodman, he's a Democrat from Kirkland, was one of the chair of the House Public Safety Commission, said lawmakers are working with the Attorney General's office to offer law enforcement agencies clarification on several of these laws. The clarification was expected to be released before the 25th. Still have not been released. Why is that important? Because a lot of these laws have some ambiguities and contradictions, and now they're in effect, and we still don't have clarification on it. You talk to attorneys and they say, well, a lot of this stuff will have to go to case law, which means we're liable for it. We've got to deal with it. Once we do something, it's going to be challenged, and that's where it's going to be settled, which is not the way you should be approaching these things, but that's what happened. So what constitutes force under the new changes? So use of force is a big key to one of these bills. So what constitutes force? It's handcuffing, touching someone. There's been no clarification. There was no clarification within the laws that were passed. There's been a lot of communication. I've been in a lot of meetings with other chiefs and sheriffs and attorneys, and it's vague. Most attorneys state it'll be the case law that settles this, or the legislator the political body coming back and making some clarifications when they come back in session. Running on, so I'm going to skip some of this. In my opinion, the way that this has been handled through the state is not the way to conduct business or do this. They leave cities and counties and law enforcement out there having to deal with these loopholes or these problems. And they've given the state AG's office till July, I believe it is, of next year to come up with a model use of force policy. And yet they're holding us accountable for a radically changed use of force. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, and I'm going to skip all that. And I'm going to skip that. I'm going to read this. This is from a Spokesman Review article, and I want to read this. Washington State Attorney General will give a formal opinion about parts of the law both police and lawmakers agreed were unclear. This is a recent article. Johnson, who's the main push behind one of these bills at least, if not more, he said, he made that comment. He said, the Washington State Attorney General will give a formal opinion about parts of law both police and lawmakers agreed were unclear, Johnson said. These concerns include the ban of 50 caliber weapons, which means that we may not be able to use something like a beanbag, which is a less lethal weapon. And Johnson says, as long as they understand our legislative intent, that will help clear up these questions. Well, we can't interpret. We're supposed to act on written law and specifics, but yet a lot of things are left open to interpretation. Also, he says there's nothing in the new laws that prevent officers from responding to any crime. The laws are about what they do once they get there. However, all these restrictions, requirements, and ambiguities make it much more difficult. That's my comment. One part of the law uses the term imminent threat. I've already talked about that. It's the threshold for officers to take someone in to get mental or behavioral health treatment. Johnson said this directly conflicts with the Involuntary Treatment Act. An imminent threat is defined as the intent and ability to cause serious injury to themselves or others, while Involuntary Treatment Act specifies a likelihood of serious harm as reason to institutionalize someone against their will, according to the bill's text. Johnson said he agreed with law enforcement this language was confusing. The Attorney General will review the discrepancy and include it in their formal opinion, Johnson said. Again, this is the author of one of these bills who's noting that, yes, there are problems in these bills, and we'll clear it up sometime in the future. That's not the way you should be doing business, in my opinion. We're stuck with it. We've got to interpret it and hope we do the best with what we've got. And I'm going to skip this. There's some other pieces on here where he talks about the Attorney General will issue some rulings on it. Again, these are after the fact. He talks about reasonable suspicion being probable cause being a very low standard. I think the article that quoted him was probably wrong. I'm assuming he meant reasonable suspicion because that is a lower standard, but it is a key to investigations conducted by law enforcement officers. And I sent you folks a comment by the Sumner City Council member, which I thought was a good article. Hopefully you read that. I'm not going to reread it for you. I do want to read two more things and I'll be done. This is an article recently, I think it was in Fox News, maybe it was in more. It's by Senator Tim Scott. It's an article referring to him. It says he warned that the rise of violent crime in cities across the country, there's one thing lawmakers cannot do if they hope to pass effective police reform. One thing you cannot do in police reform is leave the impression that somehow you're going to demonize police officers. He says that's not going to happen. It can't happen. The South Carolina Republican pointed to Baltimore as a cautionary tale, saying that the city has had to request federal officers to come in because there are 400 vacant spots in the local police force. Maryland lawmakers earlier this year overrode governor's vetoes to pass sweeping police reforms, including removing protections in police due process for alleged misconduct, increasing the civil liability for officers from 400 to 890,000, and changing the standard for what is deemed necessary force. When you demonize, this is a quote, when you demonize police officers, when you defund police, when you start talking about war on police and prosecution and not on crime, you're going to have a reduction in forces. And if you tell officers that their personal liability is on the line, it's a bad decision, end quote. The Maryland bill, this is again that same article, the Maryland bill stopped short of eliminating officers' qualified immunity, which affords them some protection from liability. Scott said while certain issues are up for debate, specifically the use of chokeholds, no-knock warrants, and a program that provides police departments with military weapons, and he goes on to talking about ending qualified immunity, would not be good. So that's that article, and then this is the last section I have. But it does point out that some of these things are being talked about around the country, obviously. Just different states are taking some different approaches. And finally, House Bill 1310 opens in part with this quote, I'm quoting this, the legislature intends to address excessive force and discriminatory policing by establishing a requirement for law enforcement. This is from Representative Johnson, who introduced the bill. He later stated in an interview, as we implement new laws to protect families from police violence, I will continue to monitor, and he goes on. At least two of these bills have conflicting language. This is from me. Some reported written open to subjective interpretation and contrary to common sense. Many issues were pointed out to our politicians by law enforcement professionals and likely others, and those wanting to pass these bills didn't care and were clearly biased towards law enforcement. That's my opinion. Those passing these bills have given the Attorney General's office, in some cases the Criminal Justice Training Commission, 6 months or a year to adopt model policies, such as use of force policy, yet have obligated law enforcement to make these changes and be accountable to these changes prior to having police or policies in place. They are seemingly unconcerned with the ambiguity presented to law enforcement, prosecutors, and communities who are trying to understand, adapt, and reconcile inconsistencies and confusion based on these poorly thought out laws. Changes taking place, especially in the manner that are happening, create heightened liability for officers and communities employing them. Why would you enact such a sweeping change and not first have those you trust, the Attorney General, complete the model policy first? They want organizations such as mental health and others to handle calls for service in many of these non-criminal type of incidents, and law enforcement professionals have been seeking this for a long time. Some of these bills refer to these structures, but they're not set up. They're not in place. They don't have adequate funding or staffing. So we're left to handle it. And now we have a lot more restrictions. I do want to make sure that the community understands, and council, that the Oak Harbor Police Department and the quality men and women we have working here have been working hard to understand, adapt, and modify and train for these new requirements as best we can. And even with the changes, we're going to do everything we can to keep our community safe. We want to ensure that people understand that things just got more complicated, not only for law enforcement, but for the community based on these some of these new laws, especially as we adapt and understand them. We ask people to be patient and understand we have to follow law, and there are just some things that we have to change or can't do anymore. So that's long. I debated that probably longer than I should have gone, but there you go. And I want to run down just real quick these things you see on the screen. I'm not going to scroll down, but police tactics we talked about. That's chokeholds, those types of things. There's also canine in there. We don't deal with canine. Use of force I went into quite a bit. Electronic recording and custodial interrogations. So that doesn't take effect till January. We're going to be okay on that for the most part because we have body cameras. You guys moved us forward in that, and we're set to record these for adults if you have them in custody on felonies and some other requirements. Juvenile attorney access takes effect in January. What that really means is if you have a juvenile and you want to do a custodial interrogation of them, which can be varied and interpretive, you have to first put them in contact with an attorney, not offer them an attorney, but put them in contact with an attorney. Of course, I can let you know that attorneys probably 99% of the time are going to tell them not to have a conversation with the police officers. So that's going to affect crimes we can solve and accountability that juveniles will have. We'll have to base it on everything other than statements from them. Office of Independent Investigations, you know, the bill, I-940 set up that we had to use a SMART team, which is an independent organization outside of the department to do investigations of like a police shooting. We're part of that with Skagit SMART. This sets up another one at a governor's level where the governor, right now it's, Inslee, he appoints people to this unit, and they can come in at any time they want to and take over that investigation whenever they want, or they don't have to if they don't want to. Duty to intervene, that really says that if an officer sees an unlawful use of force, they have to intervene, which we already have that in our policy. We've had it for a long time. There's some confusions in this as to what if we go to help another agency? How are we to determine whether what they're using is legal within their policy or not? For the most part, it's not. We understand it. Impeachment disclosures, law enforcement data collection, and audit of independent investigations. Those are not major things for us. Protection orders is a big bill, but it's not a major for us. It's just some technical stuff. Grievance arbitration panels is basically not a bad thing for us. It really rearranges how, if you have a grievance within from your association to your administration, how those are handled. And it's not a bad thing. Decertification it really puts a lot in the hands of the Criminal Justice Training Commission. Officers can be decertified, which means they can't work as police officers based on a lot of different factors. And then State versus Blake is the drug law, which basically just says that all these previous felony narcotics laws are now misdemeanor. You have to warn somebody twice, or not warn them. You have to give them 2 referrals to drug treatment. Big change for you as a city council people is any prosecution or incarcerations as a result of any of these drugs, heroin, cocaine, meth now, is no longer the county's responsibility. It's now the city's responsibility. So that's going to cause an increased workload and increased cost for the city. So it's a complicated changes. I've tried to sum it up as best I could. Hopefully you guys read the stuff that I sent you, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from council? Councilman Servadius.
Thank you. Chief, you gave a couple of examples. Obviously, first and foremost, thank you for all that you and your team do. It's I know a lot of times a thankless job in public safety. You gave a couple of examples of a retail establishment being broken into, or the other one is an active vandalism that was witnessed by someone, and you said that you didn't have reasonable, or used to have reasonable suspicion. What would be an example of probable cause that would give an officer, and I know that's being possibly defined, or I don't know if that's still being defined, but what would give an officer probable cause in either of those examples to stop and then, I guess, retain them? I don't know if that's use of force to actually, unless they just voluntarily stand there and answer your questions. But what is probable cause at this point? So,
and that's a good question, and I'll let you know. So there's seen some chief statements where, and I think they're misinterpreted, and you never know how much of it is just the article was written wrong. Saying, listen, we can't even go do something now. Well, there's a lot of things we can go do, but then we have to modify how we're going to do it. So let me go back to your example. Let's say that you, Councilman Servetus, are standing at a location and you see somebody break a window at a building, and you call us up and you see this person, and as a police officer gets there, they contact you because you said, hey, contact me at this location, and you say, right there, that person. See that person in an orange jacket with the blue pants, he's got a beard, and he's here. I watched him break that window with that rock that's right there. And you say, yes, I'm willing to give you a statement to testify to that. That's probable cause. There's reason to believe that this person broke that window based on the totality, and I know it's that person, and I know this crime was committed. That's probable cause. So I can go and arrest that person. So I then drive over. I say, hey, what's going on? Why'd you break the window? I didn't do nothing. I said, yeah, I got a witness. You're under arrest for probable cause. So let's take a different circumstance. And you say, hey, I've got a guy who was wearing a blue jeans, a gray shirt. He's about this description. He's got a beard. And yeah, he left. He went over there, and I lost sight of him. He broke the window, and I saw him. Okay, great. Contact you. The guy's left. I'm driving around. I look, and here's 2 people, 3 people standing together, and 2 of them couldn't match the description, right? The general description that you gave. So one of them probably broke the window. I don't know which one for sure, and I don't know for positive, even if I only have one person standing, until I get you to try to identify that person, unless somehow otherwise I've identified that person, right? So right then I have reasonable suspicion for a Terry stop to go contact those people and say, listen, I've got this report. You guys match the description. I need you to stay here for a minute. I'm going to have this person come by and take a look. One of you matches the description. I've got probable cause. Okay. So you've got reasonable suspicion to contact them, reasonable suspicion to hold on to them. And if they both say pack sand, I've still got reasonable suspicion because I'm investigating this crime, and let's just narrow it down to one person. I've got reasonable suspicion for that person. I'm saying, no, listen, you're staying here until I can get this person to come over because you match the description. I think it's you. You're not talking to me. I'm going to have him come over. If he doesn't identify you, you're on your way. Sorry to disturb you. If he does, you're under arrest. So there's a reasonable suspicion there. Now, under the new law, when I contact this person, he says, pack sand, I'm not going to stay here. And somebody, another officer maybe, hopefully I've got one available, goes to get you. You know, I can't stop that person. I can't use that force. I can't handcuff that person and have them stay there waiting for you to come to try to identify that person. That's a simple way to try to explain it.
Thank you for that. And I know, I've called ICOM multiple times over the years, probably more times than other citizens. And a lot of times I'll stick around or I'll try and take a picture. Is that helpful? I mean, as we think about neighborhood watch, these new laws, we have a responsibility to help the police. And so is that helpful? If so, I've always said, if you see something, say something. For a citizen to take a picture, a video, would that provide an officer with probable cause?
It could, Councilman. There's a variety of the facts and circumstances. Obviously, the more information we have before we contact a suspect, the better off we are, especially under this new law. The more we have that when I go contact that person, if that person doesn't want to stay, I can say, okay, you're under arrest, and I can force that person to stay or I can place them under arrest. The more information I have going into a call before that contact, the better off I am, because if I don't have that probable cause and I contact that person, I'm at the whim of that person. If he stays there, we're fine. If he stays there and you show up and you identify him, fine. I didn't have to use any force on the person, no problem. Of course, everybody and their mother now knows what these laws are doing. And, if it's that real criminal and he wants to push it, then I got another situation. And, and it even, the ambiguities are, can I pat the person down to make sure he's not armed if he starts looking a little goofy on me, if he starts, shifting around or there's something in his pocket? Nobody's clear if that's a use of force. That's still one of those things that's not settled, but we're still trying to make a determination on. So it's there's just a lot of gray areas in that. But yeah, the more information we have going into a call that can specifically identify somebody before I make contact with that suspect, the better. It's just most investigations, we don't have quite that level.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. Are you going to mention something briefly about the police department report, or
Mayor
just
Pro
wait till the
Tem.
next meeting?
Councilmember Mack does.
Oh, sorry. Councilman Mack, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, I'm still here. Hey, Chief Dresker, question. With these changes and working with dispatch, is dispatch going to ask a few more questions when you call them to facilitate some possible more information, or is it going to stay status quo? What are we working on there with dispatch when a business owner and or citizen calls in?
So we've had a lot of meetings. One of the meetings we had with the director for ICOM, and we had that specific conversation. And it's a little this or that, because already they try to obtain the information that they can before we get there. But we have had that conversation, just like I explained to you. That the more I have to try to determine whether I have probable cause prior to contacting the suspect, the better off. They understand that. They understand now it's maybe a little more critical. They're a little limited on what they can do based on the circumstances they have. But yes, we've had that discussion. We've also, I've had more meetings in the last, month or two based on this stuff than I'll ever have in the rest of my life, probably. But, everybody trying to solve what's going on. We've met with mental health. We've met with the crisis center that just opened up here. I've met with medical personnel. We've talked with people about who else can handle something besides us, because part of the legislation's intent is we don't want police handling all these things that they're handling, because sometimes people don't want them there and things can escalate. Whether it's mental health cases or we had an autistic child the other day whose parent called us for help. Who can we have try to do those things instead of us? Because we've always been the default, and we always want to help. That's what we do. We always want to do that. And now the state is saying, listen, we don't necessarily want you at all these, and if you're there, you need to make sure you leave or look at these other ways of handling it, because there's some liability for us now that they're placing on us. We've always had liability, but now they're even doing a little different. It's complex. We think other people, other agencies, organizations should take care of some of these things anyways, but a lot of these people are now saying, listen, we don't feel safe on some of this. Are you going to help us out? We'll always back people up for safety. They can always call us for that. That's a little more than direct to your question, but I wanted to put that in there, so thank you.
No, Chief, I appreciate it. And in my opinion, it's a mess. And I appreciate you and all your people doing out there what you do. Witnessed it this morning. They're swift, they're sharp, real polite, real professional. They do what they can do within the law. And hang in there. Kudos to all you guys. And I think this is something the council needs to mull around and possibly get into some small amount of other first responders to possibly help out as well, until we can at least the legislator can clean some of this stuff up and a little more clear, precise things. So, but I know you're on pins and needles there, but you guys are doing a good job. So keep it up. Thanks, Chief.
Chief,
yeah.
Sorry about that. Do you think this would be a good time to bring up the bone that the state threw to us regarding that funding for the legislation?
Are you talking about the $100,000?
Yeah. Apparently, we got a check in finance about a week and a half ago from the state, and it didn't really tell us much what it's about. We did a bunch of research, and we found out that it's related to, quote, one-time cost related to law enforcement and criminal justice related legislation enacted between January 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2021. It was in the amount of $91,175. So the state has a pot of $20 million that they were providing to cities all over the state of Washington. So I believe that is supposed to be one-time funding to help defray some of the costs related to this and other legislation affecting law enforcement and criminal justice.
And speaking on that, what happens is, like with this recording of interviews that's going to take place and the mandate for it, clearly the state, and clearly I'm assuming conversations took place that, hey, the only way to accomplish that is body cameras. And so we got agencies all around us who are scrambling to get body cameras now. We're lucky we have them. So the state didn't come out and say, hey, we want you guys all to have body cameras, because that's an unfunded mandate and they can't do that. What they did say is, we want you to start recording all these interviews. Well, obviously, it's going to have to be by body cameras is the most practical way of doing it. So this money that David is talking about, I don't know the restrictions or any of that, but we'll have to look at what we use that funding for. We got to do a lot of training. We've done a lot of training already. We've got different things. Be honest with you, and I'll cover some personnel things real quick when we're done with this. Just a lot of changes here we'll still have to make as we implement some policies and procedures. We've changed our policies to match what we have to for the state requirements. We're within guidance and within the requirements of that, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Chief, I have a question. Chief?
Yeah, go ahead.
Would it help? I know that you have an active Facebook page and a website. I would imagine you may start getting calls like, why the blank didn't the police show up to help me with blah, 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 to do some type of short bullet education on those? I mean, people have heard that there's changes and they have no idea what the changes are. Would that help you out at all? I mean, I'd hate for the community to turn and say, our police department isn't doing anything, if not over-inundating the comments, but at least here and there start educating the public. I don't know how else other than when you show up to educate them.
Yeah, that's already being done. So I've actually already got documents up that we'll put on our Facebook, and I wanted to have this conversation with you folks before we started doing any of that. This is one step. Obviously, those who watch the council meetings, I went into more probably than just a little bit of the details you need to know. Trust me, that's cut down from 5 other pages of opinion and stuff I like to say out there, and the current situation. And I'm not going to go into all that, but just the facts and trying to give a perspective about the changes information will be out on our social media. Most departments are doing that, so we will get that out. I wanted to have this conversation first, and then when you're ready, I'll just real quickly cover something else that also talks about the jail. The second thing that I was going to cover tonight.
Go ahead.
Okay, so as you know, the jail. We've had several conversations with council about modifying it, looking at doing a short-term facility here, like overnight or less. We've been looking at contracts with other organizations. We've done that basically for about 3 years ago, I guess we first talked about it. It's come up again. Part of the catalyst right now is we've had a lot of staff leave from the jail for various reasons, or we have a couple still leaving, not for, again, assorted reasons. So I don't have the solution. We're still contracting with SCORE right now. Island County, we've got an agreement with them, and they've been real good with us. We're not really holding people in our jail right now. And we're still talking to Skagit. In fact, I talked to him today. We're still hoping to work out a contract. So that's still going to come to you folks at some point in time to update you further. It's just not ready right now. And then I just wanted to talk quickly about our staffing. So between May of this year and June of next year, we're going to be losing anywhere from 8 to 10 police officers. So we've already lost well, by the end of August, we will have lost 4 or 5 of our officers. And I'd say probably out of the 8 that we're looking at by June of next year that I know of, probably 4 or 5 of those, their retirement dates or their exits have been either moved up, or at least a piece of it has to do with some of these new changes that have taken place in the state. Not all of them, and there's a variety of other reasons there, but pretty significant staff turnaround here within the next within that 1 year period of time, and within the next 4 months. And that's just the officers. We have a couple other staff leaving too. So just so you're aware, these changes from the state level, along with all a lot of other factors affecting law enforcement and et cetera, do have a cost and do affect staff. We've got a lot of great staff here who are working solidly through this and through the pandemic and everything else. Law enforcement is different within a city. It is a different organization. And anyways, just wanted to give you a little update on that.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
All right, let's move on to Public Works, the Prowler Memorial, Obelisk.
Good afternoon. It's Don Crawford. Lisa, can we put that, share the screen? Thank you. So let's go ahead. As we've been communicating for a while, there has been a groundswell of support for finding an alternative location for the Prowler Memorial Obelisk. In May, the Park Board had decided unanimously to make that recommendation. The obelisk is a tribute to Lieutenant Junior Grade William McIlvaine. Was a 2009 graduate of the United States Naval Academy. He was known as a Renaissance man. He was equally passionate about music, sports, foreign languages, and academics. I did a lot of reading about this and research about this young man. He was a very quality individual, and will be sorely missed from his family and from society in general. Next. Was a pilot in the Navy, and he was killed with 2 other folks, shipmates, in a training accident in 2013. Phelps McIlvaine of Bellingham, his uncle, commissioned the Prowler Memorial Obelisk in honor of his nephew. There's a partial picture of the obelisk. It doesn't have the base on it, but that's what it looks like, the obelisk itself and not the base. Next. Originally, there was much discussion and a tentative decision to have, as I understand it, and if I am wrong in that, I apologize. I'm still new. To place the obelisk and the benches, memorial benches, at the Pasek tank overlook. 2005, we started finding some, Public Works started finding cracks and other structural issues, and this has been talked about ad infinitum, and there still needs to be more discussion about that. The long and the short of it is we're still quite a long ways from getting that particular location structurally sound and get it operable again. And so, which has driven the need to find another location within the city so that we can, in a more timely fashion, get this done. Thank you. The new proposed location is in Windjammer. You'll notice on the screen there's a big star, and that location is right directly adjacent to a flagpole. If you go to the next slide, you'll see it's right next to the flagpole. It's illuminated at night, and it is in a place that is pretty quiet. And there's a place that several people can gather all at one time. And it's an appropriate place next to a flagpole, with nighttime illumination. Let's go to the next slide. As I said before, the site is illuminated. If you look at the yellow circles, so there's quite a bit of illumination there for the obelisk to make it a 24-hour site. Obviously, the park closes at 10, but in the winter months when it gets dark earlier, it's still an accessible site. Next. There are 3 benches that go along with the obelisk. And so the only modification that this particular site at Windjammer needs is that we need to put in a 48-inch by 24-foot long concrete flatwork ribbon to set the benches on, because this sidewalk is used by the first responders and service vehicles to get from the central and east side of the park to the west side, and we need to make sure that in placement of the benches in this area that we maintain that width so that we don't encumber the unnecessarily the first responders or service vehicles. And then we'll relocate the 3 benches and secure them on that flat work. Next. So that's it. Is there any questions?
Questions from council, please? Excuse me, mistake. We have a person in the audience to give public comment. I believe Mr. Phelps, and sorry if I mispronounce your last name. McElvain? McElvain. Yes, sir. Would you like to stand up and make, I'm sure we can hear you.
Thank you for addressing this issue today. My nephew was an amazing young man. At his memorial at the U.S. Naval Academy Chapel, we were encountered by dozens of people that he had met when he was in the Navy, and almost every single one of them started their stories the same way. And the way they said was, without Will, I never would have graduated from class. I never would have swum the Severn River. I never would have got through Pensacola. I never would have done this, that, or the other thing. He was the kind of young man that could literally do whatever he wanted to put his mind to. So as a junior in high school, he wasn't busy enough. So he said, I'm going to learn the bagpipes and learn to read and write Arabic as a junior in high school. But that was when he decided that just staying in the United States while he was doing that wasn't enough. So he went to New Zealand to do a year abroad in a high school that said, you can't go abroad because you won't finish the curriculum here in the United States. He said, fine, I'll just do both. And he did. He graduated with distinction from 2 schools on 2 different continents in the same year while learning the bagpipe and learning to read and write Arabic. That's the quality of the people in the jets at the local Whidbey Island Naval Air Station. When people say they are the best of the best, they really mean it. The other people in that plane, Commander Alan Patterson, had 1,200 carrier traps. He had won almost every combat ribbon a Navy flyer can get. Valerie Delaney, who was recently married when the accident took place, was a gifted singer. She took the U.S. Naval Academy from a club lacrosse team to NCAA Division I in 3 years. She was the team captain. Everybody in those planes doesn't even get into the Naval Academy unless they're valedictorians and team captains and recommended by 2 state senators. They are all the best of the best. The rest of the people on this monument all were involved in Prowler operations at some point in their careers. There is a shuttle pilot on the monument. Now, since I went public with the monument's design, I have heard from all the other squadrons saying, how come the other squadrons aren't on the monument? And the answer is because this monument is based on the one at the Naval Air Station. But because of security concerns, it's a very difficult place to visit. And so there has never been a public Prowler memorial. Now, when I looked at the scope of vetting all the accidents and all the people that perished in operations since the 1960s, there was no way for me to condense the scope of this memorial until something other than just copying the names that are on the base memorial. Those are all vetted, they're all proven. There's no question that those names should be there. Whether there are names that aren't on the monument that should be there, I could not address as an individual. So I came before this council in 2015 and made this donation. I think this city accepted it as a artwork. Recently, a member of the Arts Commission, who I think was connected previously to the military, saw the obelisk, the foundation, and the base in their original wood crate in rusting metal straps in tall grass behind a Parks Department facility with the rest of the parked trucks. That was a fairly incendiary thing to see. A military monument that has been laying there for 6 years. Now, I have called and written emails and tried to contact everybody that I started with on this project since 2015, and not one of them is still here. The city council members aren't the same. Scott Dudley's not here. The head of the Parks Department, are you? Well, you may have been the only dusty memory back there that this thing was still here. I strongly urge you to consider the new site. The new site is vastly better than anything I could have dreamed of. When I originally started bringing this idea to Oak Harbor, Windjammer Park was off the table. It was also, I think the comment was, nobody wants to be reminded of this stuff in a park. Yeah. And given that we now have a different public reaction to memorials, be they to George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Mr. York, or anybody else in Seattle or Portland or the East Coast, this has become a much more complicated proposal for the City Council to think about. Now, I think that this is going to be highly exposed to the public traffic. I think it's very likely that it will be defaced. I think there's a good chance that it will be hurt in some way, chipped or cracked or broken. I want it to go up anyway because it's very difficult to remember. Oak Harbor has had a challenge remembering that they had this. Can you put things on CD anymore? No, you can't read the CD. Can you put them in the cloud? What if your vendor goes? Remembering is expensive. If you have 34,000 pictures like me at Amazon, it's a few bucks every month. If you don't do that, they go in booklets and they go in your grandmother's attic and then she dies. Remembering is hard to do. It costs money, it takes time. The Egyptians invented the obelisk specifically for memory. And as a result, they stand in Paris, they stand in London, they stand in Washington, D.C. and commemorate the founding of this nation. They are supposed to poke a hole in the sky. They're supposed to catch the first sun in the morning and the last sun at night. This particular monument was based on another obelisk that sits on the lawn in front of the U.S. Navy Chapel at Annapolis, Maryland, at the U.S. Naval Academy. And it's commemorated for a captain named Captain Herndon, and it's called the Herndon Memorial. And if you know anything about the Naval Academy, what they do with this every year is they grease it with pig fat, and then the freshman class has to get to the top by standing on each other's shoulders until they get to the top of the monument and pull off a Dixie cup. And when they do that, they have officially graduated their plebe year. But you should read the story of Commander Herndon. He saved 156 people on a hand-over-hand lifeboat from one boat to the other in a hurricane, and the other 250 on board with him went down with the ship. He went down with 22 million in U.S. bullion that was coming from South America. It's a very famous story. The bullion's recently been found. But when he went down, he took off his cap, he put on his full dress blues with his sword, and he stood at the helm as the ship went under. And he was heard last to say, "Today my honor is secure." That's what's involved in the monument. And I would really be thrilled, and I know the Prowler community would be thrilled, if you would consider putting it in Windjammer Park by the flagpole. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And for people who don't know, a Dixie cup is a sailor's hat, and it has a dark navy blue band at the very top, signifying that they are a plebe. Any questions or discussion? Councilman Servadius.
First and foremost, Mr. McIlvaine, thank you for the gift. I was here at that time as well when we accepted that, so thank you for that gift. My apologies that it has taken this long for us to get our act together. As I've said many times before, I'm in private practice. I wish the municipalities could move at that pace, but the public process does not move at that pace. I think when Ms. Kingsbury brought this up, she's the Arts Commission member that you referred to, I thought it was a more fitting location. I know there was another one that was considered as well that was a little more high traffic and just didn't seem to have the same degree of respect and the ability to sit there and pay tribute to these folks. So I absolutely support this. I think it's time to get it done. I did have a question for Mr. Crawford. When I look at the graphics that you put up there, that's just kind of a simple, I know there will be people that go by and obviously they will see the obelisk and understand what's going on, but with 3 benches, is there the possibility in that northwest corner of the existing pad to put a bench that could sit and face both the obelisk, the flag, and the water if it was on an angle? I can't tell from your graphics there if there's room to have one of those 3 benches in that, so it'd kind of be behind that red triangle which represents the obelisk. Is there room there to have a bench? I know there's the cement.
Not really. It's in order to make sure that obelisk doesn't get in the way of the periodic first responder service vehicle traffic, is to keep it closer to that corner than to the forefront. There's some concrete little stem wall there, and so we thought, because the architecture from the original design is already in place, that it would be better to have the 3 benches facing the obelisk. It would look more contrasting and fit better than to have to remove the seats that are those wooden log seats that are there to make room for it.
Okay, thank you. That is all. It was just a thought. Once again, I think it's time to get this done, and thank you again, Mr. McIlvaine.
Councilman Goebel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. McIlvaine, for your words and your your story about your nephew. As a daughter of a retired naval aviator and my cousin is currently a senior at the Naval Academy, you have my full support for this location at Windjammer Park, and I really hope to see this project through as soon as possible. So thank you for being here today.
Any other comments?
Councilmember Mack has his hand raised.
Councilman Mack, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And yes, Mr. McElvaney, I would like to thank you for showing up in person. It's always great to hear all those war stories. And yes, I'm also a son of World War II aviator, and these types of things are very important. And I would like to do anything that I can do to move this forward as quickly as possible. I've approved that location. I can support that location. I think it's a proper location, and arrange the benches however it sees fit that works for that location. So it's a good thing for our community, showing support for our aviators and all the naval people here on Oak Harbor. So let's get this thing forward, and let's get her done, folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. If staff and council will indulge, I would like to take a 1-minute recess to go over and personally shake hands with Mr. McElvey. All right, 1 minute.
That's all right. I'm a bond guy. I know what bond underwriting is all about. Thank you.
I realize this isn't social distancing. I'm so glad you could come.
Glad you guys were willing to listen.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Graduated from the University of Washington in 2015, and 6 years later, it's getting done.
Good. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, staff and council. All right, our next agenda item is administration. Mr. Oborn, please.
In the interest of the time, I'll just take any questions anybody has on the report.
Councilman Servatius.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Oborn, I really do appreciate all the information that all the department heads provide, and I'm assuming you distill down or put in here, but when I say distill down, I'm looking at this one, it's 271 pages. 95 of those are all of these Zen City reports. And if you include, there's some other social media pages, it's like 125 just on social media. I'm wondering if there's a way that could be distilled down to a paragraph from each department head, a paragraph or two from you that highlights the monthly things we should note. There's a lot of times, you guys are full-time staff. We have to get through this, and when I look at, not to mention the cost, if we still print any of these out, printing 271 color pages, is there a way to distill this down? Still maybe have it there electronically if we really wanted to take a deep dive. If you made a mention of, these were the 3 trending keywords on social media in the last 30 days, then we could drill down. I'm still not sure. I spent a lot of time going through the Zen City reports this time, and a lot of that I don't even understand exactly what those reports are telling us. So I don't know. I won't put you on the spot to ask you if you are intimately familiar with all 271 pages, but for us to get through that, it's pretty, at least I'll speak for myself, it can be fairly intimidating at times to get through that much material. So I would greatly appreciate, whether it's from the department heads that provide this information, a 1-paragraph summary. Chief Merrill's sitting here. Chief does a great job with the fire call reports. It's usually 2 sentences, 3 sentences. Here are the number of calls this past month. We had 1 fire, 1 something. If you have any questions, give me a call. And then the report follows. I very much appreciate that, Chief. And so that's what I would be looking for in this. So I appreciate that the information is there, but if we could make it just a little more user-friendly, that would be appreciated for me. Thank you.
Yeah, if you notice over the almost 3 years I've been doing this report, it's evolved. and it will continue to evolve based upon input. So it started off smaller, went bigger, and we could certainly go around and look at options there and kind of looking at the option. I think the first 3 pages are intended to be the executive summary component on it, and we can probably make it more of a executive kind of things and maybe a 10 page or a little bit shorter input there, but we'll continue to evolve it and appreciate the input.
Any other comments from anyone? Mr. Oberon, I had a question. A couple from the Arts Commission was saying that the notes and agenda stuff that they give you seems to come out different. It's not what they've given your staff, that the wording or there's a slant to it. And I was just wondering, is there why adjustments are being made or whatever? It's just, when I've gotten a couple of calls, I felt like I should ask.
I'm not understanding your input here, but certainly I could work with staff and we could look into that and respond.
All right, thank you, I appreciate that. Did Mr. Mack have a comment? Okay. All right, the next agenda item is City Council, schedule for City Council retreat. Mr. Oberon, I'm guessing this is your baby?
City clerk actually is going to take a shot at it. We're going to all do it together, and we also have our other administrative staff, Sabrina Combs and Lisa Felix, that can possibly help us as we steer through and try to figure out the will of the council and in a possible retreat. So go ahead, Lisa. Julie.
Thank you, Blaine. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, what we are wanting to get from council are all of your inputs for scheduling your council retreat. There are several items that we need to take into consideration in scheduling this retreat. It needs to be an open public meeting. It needs to be in both a physical and virtual live meeting format at this time, per the governor's proclamation that he has not yet rescinded. That's proclamation that we read at the beginning of every meeting. So that does require that we have both the physical and virtual live meeting component for your retreat. At this time, only this facility here in this room do we have that capability, because we do not have film crews and film cameras and all of the things to connect to a live feed, all of the equipment that would be needed to have an off-site retreat. So taking that into consideration, we need to think about how far down the line we would like to do your retreat. Would council be wanting to have a retreat meeting sooner here at the council chambers, or would council want to put this off a little ways until we have more direction from the governor as to how we will be proceeding with our open public meetings?
I guess I have a question about the open public meeting. All the retreats before were a workshop just for staff and the council on what things do we need to think about the next year? Do we have certain goals? We have our mission statement up there. So why suddenly does a retreat, which is usually just a small group, working group on what should we look at, emphasis, what's been coming up, why now is it required to be an open public meeting? Is my question. I've never heard of this before. Mr. Weed might be able to.
Under the Open Meetings Act, whenever a quorum of the council meets to discuss any sort of city business, which would mean whenever 4 or more of you gather to discuss city business, we do have to note it as an open public meeting and make it available to the public to attend either in person or remotely. I think the challenge that Julie has described is that it is mandatory currently that you have remote capability for those who don't want to come in person, and this particular room may be the only one that's at least currently suited to be able to accommodate that.
All right, thank you. Ms. Heisen?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Yes, in the past, whether we've gotten together at the yacht club or Public Works or here, it's always been noticed and open so someone could come in if they wanted to, but it's never been live streamed. So it's because of the proclamation and that little detail that it's kind of mucking up the work. So if all council members and staff agreed that we wanted to meet in person and no one opted to attend remotely, is that something we would be able to do, or would the remote option still have to be available? It does still have to be available. Well, I'd say, I mean, we do need to have a retreat, but I don't see the harm in maybe waiting another couple months to see if we have the option of having it somewhere else, but I'm fine either way.
Councilman Svradius?
Thank you. Crazy how time flies, but in about 3-ish months, a little over 3 months, we'll have an election, so there could be potentially there's 4 seats up for election, but only 3 contested, so up to 3 new council members. So I think it would make sense to wait and see the results of the election, have the council retreat after that, so if there's any new council members, they can participate. Also, we're almost, at that point, we'll have been a year into our budget cycle, and crazy how that time flies, but it would make sense to have a council retreat, establish our priorities, since we set the budget and the policy, and then right on the heels of that in the spring, our finance director and all the department heads can start cranking up the necessary mechanisms to implement that upcoming budget. So it'll happen very quickly, but I would say put it off probably till the end of the year, or at least after the election, whenever, and then everyone that's new or involved can be involved, and it'll lead into then a budget discussion from there.
Councilman Goebel?
Yeah, Councilmember Svradius stole my idea. He read my mind. I was going to say the exact same thing, that for new council members, it'd probably be nice to wait until when they've been elected, and then there could be a retreat just to catch them up to speed. So that's my consensus.
My comment, I'm not sure if Mac has his hand up.
He does.
Would be, let's have a council picture, though. We need to, for history sakes, also because these people have given their time, they've been elected and chosen. I think we need to document that. So other than the retreat, I think we need to have that picture and be able to put it up there. Mr. Mack, sorry I stepped on your toe. Your comments, please.
That's okay, Mayor Pro Tem. You have seniority over me, so you're good. I think it's a little premature to do anything in the next few months. I think it'd be more prudent to wait for new council members and with other information coming online. So I could support a retreat first part of the year. Sometime late January would make sense to me. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Good of the order? Oh, Mr. Oborn, please.
I think we appreciate the input, and we'll target January or February. Last one we did was on February 1st, and it tied in really well with the budget cycle. We'll have the new council members on, at least 2 new council members, just 2 of them unfortunately aren't running for re-election here. So certainly it'll be a good opportunity to work together. So we appreciate the input, and we'll go ahead and target that time.
All right, and I'm guessing our city clerk will be the photographer or arrange for someone to be able to do that?
We will arrange for a professional photographer, I'm sure, Mayor Pro Tem. We talked about possibly doing this right after the election, so while we still have our seated council members, we could take all of your picture and then also at the same time schedule for our new incoming council members to come in, pay for 1 fee instead of 2.
Sounds like a plan. All right, does any council member have anything for the good of the order, questions, whatever? All right, we are adjourned, and I want to thank staff for your time very much and our questions that we pepper at you, and everyone go out and enjoy a lovely Oak Harbor evening. It is actually